Hi, in this part of the tutorial, we are going to create a new class and adding members, methods, constructors, and we can understand what are these things. For that, I'm going to create a new project in Visual Studio. For that, File, New, Project. Then there are different types of project types here. We can create different types of application that like Windows Universal, Classic Desktop, Web. That means web application, mobile applications, and different types of application. For the simplicity, we are creating console application. This is a console app in .NET framework. We selected the language C sharp. Console application means it's a simple type of application that is work in the terminal or command prompt. So these types of application does not have any kind of visual things like graphical user interface. So for the starters, it would be better to understand the concept. So I selected a console application, and I'm naming in this application as first console app. Any name you can type, and if you want to change the location of the project, you can change as well. Then rest of the default setting, then click OK. So as I told you earlier in the sessions, Visual Studio makes a lot of things easier. It will create a lot of things by itself. So we don't need to bother about most of these things. So a console application usually we know that it will work in DOS. Older version of Windows was DOS. DOS is just a command prompt, so it will work on that command prompt. So this is a this is a solution explorer in Visual Studio. This is a solution, so I'll tell you what is a solution and project is. So a solution may contains different projects. So here in this case we only have one project. It's a console application, and solution may contains different projects, and this is a solution explorer, and this is a properties window. Properties window, we can check for the properties kind of things here. So this time it is opened the program.cs directly here. So I am going to create a new class. So for that I can directly create a new class here, class edition, but I'm not going to create the class here. Instead of that, I'm going to create a class as a new class file. Why? Because the creating a class inside means creating different classes in one file makes it difficult to locate. So it is better to create new class inside the project. So we can add, we can right click on the application, then add class. So this will create a class file. So I'm going to addition. This is a class name I created. So this class is generated, and you can see there are a lot of namespaces is already using here. These are these were the common namespaces, so that's why Visual Studio added this one. So here I am going to create two variables. So these a and b are integer variables, so it can store only integer values. So if we have multiple variables of same type, we can use comma to create like this. It is the same as like int a, int b, but I'm just creating two variables. Then I am adding a method. As in the previous classes, I told you that a class means it contains status and behavior. Status means it is representing the variables. Status means it need to store some data. For that, we are using variables, and it's a functionality or behavior that implemented by methods. So I'm adding a method to add two numbers and display the result in the console. For that, so what this method is doing, a method will do a functionality. What this method is doing, it takes two parameters x and y, and it will display the sum. That's what it is doing. And a method always have the first part of the method will be return type. Return type means if this method returns something, like if this method return the sum of these two numbers, then we can add int add. But now this method is not returning anything, that's why it is adding as void. Then this is a method name. This method name is add, and inside this brackets we are adding the parameters. If we have multiple parameters, we can use commas. So this is a method. So how can I use this class inside here? So this class contains two variables and a method. It's a very simple class. So how can I use this class there? This one, like addition ad or addition. Okay, this is the way to create an object. So what actually happens is, when I return like this and I write like this, then it will create an object inside the memory in the same model like this. So this is the model, or this is a blueprint, and what it is doing, it is creating an object in the name of addition. This is addition, that is an object name, and it is creating inside the memory as per the definition here. So this object contains two variables a and b, and a method that add. These two things will be contains inside this addition. So I can add values to the its variables, like addition dot. So if I need to add access its variables, I need to make it public. So this is the access modifier. We can add public, private, inherited. I will tell you what is this access modifier in the other chapter, but basically public and private means, we cannot access outside the class. Then public means we can access. I made it public. Then addition dot a is equal to, I can add a value like this. Addition dot b is equal to, I added a value. Then if I made change, I'm not using any arguments, and instead of x plus y, I'm adding a plus b. So I change this method for the simplicity, means this method will not return any values, and it is not accepting any values, but it is using the same variable inside the class and doing the calculation. So here I added two values. Here I added values to the variable, and I am just calling that method addition dot add, but that method is not here. We can This is another advantage of Visual Studio. It will display errors. It is displaying an error like ad is inaccessible due to its protection level. Why? Because this is not public. This is a private method. So added public here. So it is added. Now we can check the result. You can use Control F5 to start the application. Control plus F5. Or for the debugging, I'll tell you what is debugging in the later chapter. If it is debug, then we can use simply F5. So now you can see this program prints 47. Is correct? Yes, because 45 plus 2. So it is adding the two numbers and displaying the result. So what actually happened? This is a model blueprint, and this one have two variables and a method. What it did is we just created an object with this class like this and passing values to its variables and calling function add. This is actually happened. So now what we are going to do is uh, just knowing what is the constructor. So now we are going to learn about the constructor. So I think you understood the basics how actually a class is. Class is just like a blueprint, and it will contain variables and it will contain methods. Variables store values, methods do some action. So now we can check about the constructor. So as you can see, this is the way I added values to the variable. So if I remove this, or I can comment with pressing Control and K, Control K, Control C. That is a shortcut for commenting. We can select the line, then we can comment like that. So if I run application again, it is value 0. Where it get the value 0? That's what I'm going to say. Then a constructor. What is a constructor? So this is a comment. If we want to write a single line comment, we can use this one and then we can write. So I'm going to create a simple constructor. This constructor is known as a default constructor. For any class, if we do not add any constructor, then it will be automatically there. Means we don't need to define if another constructor is there. So this constructor means it is using to provide values uh, to the member variable. For example, in this class, if we want to provide values to this variables, we can use constructors. This is a default constructor. I will tell you, you can understand while I am creating a new constructor. Constructor can be overloaded. Overload means we can use different parameters as input parameters, and we can use different constructors. Constructor will not have any return type values. As you can see in this method, it is contains return values, but constructor does not contain any return values. So just look at this constructor. This constructor is using when we call this constructor. How we call this constructor? We can call this construction. We can create a new object. Addition 1 is equal to addition. Then as we open, it contains a suggestion, means it contains two constructors. One is a default constructor, other is accepting index and int y, this other constructor. So we can provide a values here directly. I provided 2 and 4. Then if we calls for the add function, then what we can see is it will be 6. This is the first addition dot add, second is addition 1 dot add. It is how this value, this 2 and 4 reached here, because it is calling this constructor. This, when we initialize like this 2 will come to the x and it will reach to a. So a value will be 2 and y value will be 4. So the constructor is using to initialize the member variables like this. So we don't need to explicitly giving values like addition dot a is equal to this one, addition dot b is equal to this one. No, we don't need to do that. And this one is also the default constructor. And default constructor means if there is no constructor in the class, then there will be automatically, if there will be a default constructor. So that default constructor is using that default constructor will make the member variables to default values. For integer, there is a default value is 0, and there are I'll put the default value list in my blog. I will give the link in the description. So the default values will be for each data type, like integer, floating point numbers, every data type it is having a default value. So if we just call the default constructor, all the variables inside the class will comes with the default values. So that's why when we use addition dot add, it is returning 0. Then one more thing, if I comment this constructor, then what will happen is, just I'm going to run. So I'm getting build errors because there is no argument that corresponds to the required formal parameters x in addition node in, because it is telling that there is no constructor like this defined in this class. But if this one is not there, then it will work, because if the theory is like this: if there is no constructor inside class, then default constructor will be automatically there. Like if I comment this constructor also, and so I'm commenting this one also, otherwise it will errors. If there is no, so in this class no constructor is defined, only one method is there. If no constructor is defined, then default constructor will be automatically there, we don't need to write it. So that's why it is running and it is giving 0 values. But if any constructor is added, Control K U, you can use a shortcut as to uncomment. So if any other constructor is added, then the default constructor will go away. So if we try to run this, there will be no constructor. So if we add any other constructors, then we need to add the default constructor like this, so it will work. So I hope this one you understand the thing, that is default constructor and parameterizer constructor. The constructors can be overloaded. We can overload like this in a different way with the input parameters like public addition int x, only defining a is equal to x, b. I'm not giving any values to b. So what will happen is b value will be the default value. If I add like addition and basically new addition, just I'm giving only one value, what will be the result? Can check. The result is 3. So we can create constructors like this. So what is a constructor means? A constructor is used to provide the values when we create objects. So this time we are creating objects, and this object, if we need to put some values, then we can use like this. Okay. Then the next thing is the method. We are just calling the method. A method also can be with the same name. We can provide different way, like so previously we created a method like this, just copy pasting, and in the way we can remove this a to x and v to y. So we can call addition 1 dot add. Then add method also contains multiple type, so we can give 4 and 5 to method itself. So this, when we call this, it comes to here, not here. So the x value will be 4 and y value will be 5. If we are not provided any values add, then it will directly call this method. This is actually method overloading, means same method name but different parameters. And this is constructor overloading. Constructor will not have any return type, and the constructor name should be the name of the class name. That's the main thing you have to understand. So these are the basic thing about a class. So a class is actually a blueprint of not a blueprint that we are creating, and we are creating a class as a physical entity. Like if it is a person, then it person can person have address, uh, address name, that kind of things. So that kind of things will be as variables, and it provides some functionalities or some actions that will define in methods. And and the constructor is used to initialize the variables. Methods are different types, so you don't need to always learn methods will be different types, like some methods will not have return type, and some method will not have any return type. Some method have the input arguments like this, some method does not have input arguments. So if a method in the other in the upcoming chapters we will use a different method that will return different values, but you have to understand basically like this. A method have uh, input, it have return types and input arguments. Some of them have return arguments, some of them have input, some of them does not have input arguments, some of them does not have input arguments. Okay, I hope you understood the basics of a class, and if you have any suggestions on my class, uh, you can write in the comments. I'll take it positively and I will try to improve my class. um, okay, thank you.